Am I on? Can you all hear me? Okay, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Bill Martin. I've been around a long time. Before I get started tonight, I'd like to do a little generalization on the Cartesian coordinate system to let you know that if any time tonight you think that maybe I'm sort of a negative guy because I denounce a lot of things, you'll know that I'm not a negative guy. So here we go. How many of you have heard any of the subvolitional courses? Can I see a show of hands so I can get some sort of an idea here? That's good. Subvolitional, I meant. What did I say? All right. In the subvolitional course, Galambos talked about the negative ego, a person with negative self-esteem with rational reasons for having it. I mean, they know why they've got negative self-esteem and there are no delusions associated with this. So that's a person with a minus self-esteem for the right reasons. Then over here, you've got somebody with a positive self-esteem for the wrong reason. Galambos identified this as the universal psychological disease, and he gave it a name called the ego minor. I'll bet all of you that took that course have said that 1,000 times in your life. There goes another ego minor. Ego minor collapse. You're having an ego minor collapse. Over here is a person with negative self-esteem, but for the wrong reasons, for delusions, not for something that can be backed up or substantiated by the use of the scientific method. A lot of people here. A lot of people here. And over here in this quadrant, you have somebody with a positive self-esteem for positive reasons. Now, I get a lot of flack from people. They say, boy, you sure are a negative guy. You're always denouncing this and exposing that, and you lambaste certain people and actions. You're a negative guy. And my answer to that is, When you're denouncing an injustice, when you're saying something negative about something that is wrong, you are providing a positive result for somebody. You might be liberating them from an injustice. That's here, right here. That's the negative guy. I remember in algebra, which I only took one time in my whole life, and that's when I was a freshman at Oregon State College. And that's because they forced you to go to ROTC, and I was in the Naval ROTC program, and I had to take mathematics. First time in my life I ever took a math course. That's a fact. And in that course I learned that if you multiply a negative times a negative, you get a positive product. And if you multiply a positive times a positive, you get a positive product. So, this axis line here is the positive axis line. I submit to you there aren't very many people that are on this axis line except us in this room. Because we know the difference between right and wrong, and hopefully here we all live it. Here's where the flatlanders are. They're always saying negative things about the right things and positive things about the wrong things. And they don't understand me. You've probably run into the same experience in your own life. So the next time any of you get told that you're a negative person, you just remember this little diagram here and say, no, I am a very positive person because when I'm speaking negatively about something, I'm denouncing it because it's wrong. That isn't a negative statement. That's not a negative act. So let's establish right now, this evening, that if you hear me say some negative things about certain people and certain actions that I've experienced in the last 6 months, you'll understand that I'm not being a negative person here. I'm denouncing that which is wrong. All right, how do you turn this thing off? Just Okay. I'm not used to chords and things. Okay, you got some lights? Is this all there is? Let there be light, please. Well, while they're looking for the lights here, let me just tell you that I first heard the sound of Galambos' voice on the night of September 28th, 64. That's a long time ago. But something happened 3 days earlier. On Friday afternoon, I was in what was called the bullpen of this Connecticut General Life Insurance Company, new agents. Kind of like a bullpen or something like that. And we had to make cold calls on Friday to make appointments. That's about the toughest business in the world, let me tell you. And it was about 10 minutes to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I said, well, I'll make one more call. I'll just do one more call. And the name was Ed Barr, B-A-R-R. And he was a guy that was in the yachting business over there on Mission Bay. And I had my list of answers to objections. I was just a fledgling in the business, and I called this guy up, and boy, he threw the book at me. You in the insurance business? Yes. But the purpose for my calling you, sir, is not to sell you insurance, but to explain to you what estate planning is all about. Well, I got a lawyer. Well, I'm not here to replace your attorney, but to supplement what he neither has the time nor the inclination to do. And this went on back and forth. I think it was about 7 or 8 objections that I answered brilliantly, quickly, only because I was reading them off the list. And finally, he couldn't get rid of me, and he was too polite to hang up. And he said, I'll tell you what, if you can get over to my office by 5 o'clock, I'll grant you an interview. Goodbye. And I'm out. I'm into my car. I fly across San Diego, and I did it. I got there at 5 o'clock sharp. And he was sitting in his office on Mission Bay. And I walked in, and I gave him our approach talk, which I had learned. And I had memorized, word for word. Tried awful hard to make it not sound canned. And when I got through, I was preparing to bridge to data, which we were trained. And he interrupted me. And he said, who are you going to vote for? Now, you all know in the selling business, you're not supposed to talk about religion or politics, right? So I said, well, there goes that. And I was hell-bent on getting Barry Goldwater into office because I realized that Lyndon Baines Johnson was a crook. And so I said, I'm going to vote for Barry Goldwater. And he looked at me and he says, why? And I said, well, because, let's see. Lenin said that the morality of the Communist Party is dictated by the exigencies of the class struggle, and that's a relative standard of morality. And in America, we believe that morality is an absolute, and we don't compromise with that principle. So therefore, any presidential aspirant who states that we ought to peacefully coexist with the Russians is either inexcusably naive or he's a bloody conspirator. And Goldwater says you can't coexist with the Russians, so therefore that's how I vote. Totally unaffected by this, Mr. Barr looks at me and he says, well, now how do you know you're right? And I said, well, and before I could answer, he says, do you find that a philosophically provocative question? And I said, hot damn, this guy knows philosophy. This is my kind of man here. And I said, well, And before I could answer, he says, would you like to hear where that comes from? And would you like to learn about a concept or standard of rightness that is absolute and for all things? Now that's a whopper. And then he says to me, you're quite semantically precise. Now we all know where that comes from. Anyway, in one of my very best moments of my life, I proved that I was intellectually honest. And I said, frankly, I don't know how to tell the difference between right and wrong for all things. Yes, and I do find that a philosophically provocative question. And without a hesitation, he reached into his into his desk drawer, pulled it out, and pulled out a little white slip. It was about this big, about that thick, and it's called a registration form. And he says, well, if you mean what you say, you'll have a chance to get your answer on Monday night. You've missed the first session, but you can come and hear the second session, and it's called How Do You Know You're Right? Of course, he was talking then about Course 100. I'd like, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce my dear friend, the man that brought me into the theory, a man I've never forgotten, a man I'll ever be grateful to, just as you should always be grateful to whoever it was that brought you into this inimitable theory. And I've asked him to bring his captain's hat because he is a captain, full-fledged captain. And so, Mr. Barr, would you please stand so everybody can get a good look at you, please? Put the cameras on him. Put the cameras on him. Thank you, Ed. You're my man. He cared enough to challenge me, and he had the courage to close me. He taught me more about selling that day than I had learned in 2 weeks of training. How to close. How to close. To a large extent, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting here tonight is about how to close. Now, when I heard session 2 of Course 100, my notes were, I had doodles. But after about page 2, I really got serious. Because Galambos taught me about the first most important idea I'd ever heard in my entire life. And that was the distinction between relative and absolute importance. He demonstrated that by showing the tremendous importance of Archimedes versus Marcellus and Genghis Khan. And then he followed it up by explaining what made that importance absolute, that it was derived from an incredible method called the scientific method, which dealt exclusively with truth and validity. And I'm telling you, my notes really bore down. I still have them. Unfortunately, the yellow paper that I dealt with is very old now, and it's burning up. I don't know what to do about it. It's just too bad, but I treasure those notes. Well, I didn't have anybody to talk to, so I had to take the course again, and then again, and then again and again. And then I took course V201, actually F201, followed by V201. And then I took V30, and then I took V76, and I took everything I could get my hands on because I was starved for the truth. I was starved for rightness. I had a passion for it. And I had been developing in this as a result of my upbringing. Because I'm Irish, I was born and baptized a Catholic, and my mother was a feisty Irish woman who used to challenge the priests and ask them why in the hell they used to wear those long robes. And why do you put white collars around your neck to make yourself look different from other men? And my little diminutive, fiery Irish mother with a lyricism that is second to none would challenge these priests. And as a boy, I would watch her. And I learned about how to be a religious free thinker from that. That my mom could take on the whole might of the Catholic Church and quote Jesus in the 23rd chapter of Matthew at him and make him speechless. And so we had a stormy odyssey. We left Catholicism and wandered through Protestantism, and she kept taking on all these priests and all these churches and all these preachers. and always exposing them with Scripture. And my mother's passion, which I got from her, is that you have to save your soul. It's important. Salvation is everything. You must live for more than just your life. She used to love to quote from Matthew 16, where it says, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his own soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? So these deep spiritual and religious values were inculcated in me. So that when I finally met Galambos, after a 5-year intensive program of reading the classics and rendering myself conversant with the heritage of the world and getting myself broadened out and gaining a sense of romance for life and for distant countries and remote ages, I was really ready to hear Session 2 of Course 100. And it was, I used to tell Galambos, he had a hard time believing this, but I said it was an instant take with me. And I said, I'll never leave it, because you're absolutely right. And many years later, I finally figured out what I thought constituted the concept of enlightenment. What does it mean to be enlightened? Always before, intuitively, I thought the enlightened person was a person who knew everything. But then I decided, no, you can't know everything, and I know all kinds of people who know all kinds of stuff, and they're as dumb as they can be. So I decided that the enlightenment has to do with knowing the difference between right and wrong. Knowing what truth is, knowing what validity is, and knowing what morality is, and how they're interrelated. And so, as the years progressed, I always kept a distance from the professor, didn't want to get too close to him, probably like a lot of people. And I wound up setting a record at FEI, at least this is what Galambos told me. I had taken 20 of his 22 Concepts 21. And they used to have them up there at the Highlands Inn in some of you. How many of you have been to, okay, here we go. Okay. You know, I consider the Highlands Inn my alma mater. I went up there for Old Lang Syne not too many months ago, and I told my wife, I said, this is where I went to the university. This is where I learned, this is where I got it compacted, this is where I learned this stuff. Really learned it. So anyway, the years passed along, and then coming around about the year 1991 in March, Mrs. Galambos called me and she asked me if I'd help her husband sign his trust, and if necessary, that is, as he, she said, only had 3 people left to him in his affections and trust. And of these, she said, I ranked first. I don't say this to boast. I don't say this to tout myself. I just want you to know the truth and the facts about my life, because it's going to be important to you tonight. On the 19th of January of that same year, roughly 3 months earlier, she called me at 6 p.m. in the evening to inform me that her husband wanted to make me his literary executor and would be calling me for this purpose, which is something he did. But some of you or most of you here must know that at that time he was getting ill, quite ill, as a matter of fact. On April 16th of 1992, the trust was executed by the professor and his wife. And I would like to let you know that in that trust, he named his trustees and he named his literary executors. The literary executorship was a special function, a special entity that was to handle and essentially copyright, or the right to copy or to use, his very important primary property. He did not entrust that to his trustees. They had a P2 function essentially, and the P1 function he would only entrust to those that he considered to be competent to deal with his intellectual property. In fact, in that trust, he referred to the literary executor as his literary agent and was responsible for the management of the manuscripts of his courses and his innovations and so on. And knowing Galambos, you can understand that he would want to make that most explicit. So in the trust, he defined the management of his manuscripts as the editing and or publishing of his literary works. He asked me, and Mrs. Galambos asked me, would I be a backup to the trusteeship and also a backup to the literary executorship? And I agreed. So in the trust document of April 16, 1992, I was named as the backup or the alternate trustee of the estate. The first named was Mr. Wayne Joyner, who at that time was their attorney. I was named as the backup literary executor behind Mr. James Gafford, who sits here in the first row, and all of you know him. All right, on February 14th, or rather April 16th, October 23rd of 1995, we're coming ahead about 3 years, we find that there was an amendment done to this trust, and this amendment executed on October 23rd, 1995, replaced me as the alternate trustee of the estate in favor of Mr. Charles Hayes. Charles Hayes was Galambos' accountant, and but Hayes did not become the successor trustee, but a co-trustee. A co-trustee. That was on October 23rd, 1995. You may know that Mrs. Galambos at this time was moribund. She was dying, and she passed away in February of the very next year, just months away. The interesting thing about this is that, in fact, Mrs. Galambos died on February 14th, 1996. In March 8th of that year, we all got the first letter from Mr. Gafford, who at that time was working on the book. He was hopeful that we would get that book and confident that he would get the book out in October, I believe it was, of that year. On September 28th, we got a letter from James Gafford, and in that letter, it was pretty much left open-ended. There was very great difficulties in working with the book. It was a much more difficult thing than I'm sure that Mr. James and Mr. Gafford anticipated. And it is. It's very difficult. In my case, and I think some of you people in the room here have been waiting as long as I have, that's 27 years, ever since March of 1971. I mean, we've been waiting. You've all been waiting. It's been a very long, and very patient, and in some ways very beautiful patience that we've all given to Galambos and to the Institute and so on. We've waited a long time. Well, in the meantime, Mr. Hayes wrote a letter to a gentleman who's in this room here and said that he was very pleased with the work that Mrs. Galambos was doing and had the utmost confidence in Mr. Gafford's ability to get the book out. It was a private letter. I have a copy of it with the permission of the gentleman to whom it was written. And then I received from Mr. Gafford the final version of the book. Mr. Gafford was confident that it was ready to go and asked me to simply read it over, and if I had any comments, any typographical errors in it or anything I saw, misspellings or a period wasn't at the end of a sentence, let him know about it. But don't write on the copy, but write it out, write the problems, write what you found on a separate piece of paper or papers. So I got the book, and that's this book here. This volume right here. This was supposedly the finished work. And so I went into my den in my house, and I sat down, and I told my wife, I said, don't bother me for a while. I'm going to make me a cup of coffee, please. I'm going to sit down in my den and read what we've been waiting for. The Theory of Freedom, V50. My God. And I looked at it cursorily. It didn't read anything. And I says, oh my God, it's here. This is it. My God, we can start to move now. And I looked at the table of contents and I said, gee whiz, man, it's going to happen. So then I began to read, and I got a few pages into it. And my wife heard this. I just dropped it on the floor. And I said, this is not marketable goods. Too many mistakes. And this doesn't sound like Galambos. So what happened is that I just pretty much said, oh, the hell with it. And my office contractual associate back here who's filming me right now, Mr. Eric Falvey. You might want to turn around and look at him. He's the guy in the blue coat back there waving to everybody. Eric said, Bill, can I look at that thing? I really want to do it. Can I take time out to just go through the whole thing? And I said, you sure can. And he says, and so he did it. And it took him about 2 weeks, I believe. How long was it, Eric? 2.5 weeks. And he worked every single day at night. And he went all the way through it. And when he was through, he had about 1,500 errors. And I'm sure as a result of the perfected process that I've gone through here in the last 3 months, there'd be a lot more. He showed that to me, and I said, oh my God. All right, that does it. That does it. It's time for the man to step forward. I've had enough of this crap. And so what I did is I said, Eric, I said, you go through here and find me categories in this book that are errors, categories of errors, like misquotes. Misquotes of Thomas Paine, for example. Unnecessary changes. Wrong words. Sloppy. Confusing text. Those are our 5 generic categories. I want you to take and find 5 examples of each of these categories here and put yellow tags on them. Yellow tags. See them? And I says, when you get them tagged, you and I are going to march in to Charles Hayes' office in Coronado, and I want you to walk around on the other side of his desk, so you're standing right next to this man, and I'll sit on the other side of the desk, and we're going to make him look at every one of these problems. And when you do it, and you turn the pages a little slowly sometimes, so he can see in the intervening pages, how many errors he's looking at in red, like that. This will have a cumulative effect. We don't want a cavalier, casual, flippant reaction. Going to make him look at it, hold his feet to the fire, and see what he does. And when we got through, Mr. Hayes, who had just less than 2 months ago said he was most pleased with the work of Mrs. Galambos and was very happy with the work that Mr. Gafford was doing, was pretty much, persuaded to get a different point of view, to say it as nicely as I can. So at this point, and this date, by the way, was September, let's see, make sure that I get this right. September the 5th, 1997. Takes us roughly half an hour to show him the mistakes. A month goes by. Hayes is putting out bids for the editorship of Galambos' book. Let me make that statement again. He's the trustee of the estate. He's putting out bids for the editorship of V50. Editorship. So I went in and finally on the 3rd of October, he comes over to pay us a visit at our office, and I have been Cooper, who is this gentleman here. Ben, stand up, please, so everybody can see who you are. This is my other worker here. Hayes meets with Ben and myself and Eric at our office, and we show him the more egregious examples of the rewriting that was going on under Mrs. Galambos' editing. And before I show you some examples of this, I would like now to go back, and Mr. Cooper, if you would put on the screen here the actual language of Galambos' trust so that you can see it for yourselves. This is actually the front page of the trust. We didn't make a copy of it here, but at the top of their trust dated April 16, 1992, you have the Galamboses as the trustors. Trustors are those who create the trust, and the trustees are those who actually run it. And I don't know how many of you are having a hard time reading that, because if you are, I'll just read it out loud. Okay. Okay, let me read it to you. Let's see here. I'm not looking for Schedule B. I'm looking for. I'm not looking for Schedule B. I'm looking for Section 17 of the trust, where he names the trustees. Do you have that, Ben? Okay, then I'll read it to you. It says, and I'm quoting from the trust. You need to know this. All of you need to know this. Very important. It's extremely important for building freedom, because this is a very historic night, and you need to really concentrate here. Upon the death, resignation, or inability to act of Suzanne J. Galambos, then Wayne Joyner, Esquire, shall become successor trustee hereunder with all the powers and duties of the original trustee. Upon the death, resignation, or inability to act of Wayne Joyner, Esquire, then William W. Martin shall become successor trustee hereunder with all the powers and duties of the original trustee. That's the trusteeship. That's here. This is the first page of the trust document. Now we come to Schedule B, which I believe was up on the board. And for your benefit, let me read to you the language of Trust B. Let's come down, bring it down to the trustors. You got it right here? It's down here. Hold on, they gave me a tool here to work with. There, right in there. This paragraph here is key. It says, that paragraph says, the trustors presently are working on numerous manuscripts which are in various stages of completion. The trustee is instructed to consult with and is authorized to utilize the services of a literary executor, whether it would be Gafford or myself or somebody in the future, acting as agent for the literary properties of the trustors. Acting as agent for the literary properties of the trustors. With respect to the management of any manuscripts which are a part of the estate of the trustors, that's Mr. and Mrs. Galambos, nominate James D. Gafford as the literary executor, and William W. Martin as a successor literary executor to work with the trustee in this regard. In what regard? In regard to the editing and publishing of Galambos' intellectual property. That duty, that sacred responsibility was not entrusted to his trustees. He separated it out, and he created the literary executorship for this purpose. Now, that's very important that you recognize this distinction, and if you recall the corporation chart in V201, it should start hoving into view here. You have the P1 company function, and you have the P2 company function. Then you got an operating company that's responsible for coming out with the book or books. The management of the manuscripts to the above shall refer to the editing and or publishing of said manuscripts. And do we have the next page? Okay. Okay. With the order of preference being the publication of the edited transcripts of Andrew J. Galambos' courses. There is a separate set of instructions of the literary executor which is incorporated by reference in this declaration of trust. All right? Now you know who's who. You didn't know before. Poor Mr. Gafford was never advised by the trustees that he was a literary executor, nor was I. I don't think they knew that I knew the attorney who drafted this document and could get a copy of this. But knowing that, and knowing what the professor wanted to happen to his estate, I decided, okay, it's time to step forward. Mr. Gafford is not able to finish the book, and like a man in early October, very early October, first week of October, the 4th of October, Mr. Gafford tells me, I'm sure it's in my notes here, but I don't like to look at notes. Mr. Gafford was pretty much, as it were, called on the carpet by the trustees, precipitated by my earlier actions. And I want you all to know in this room that Mr. Gafford, on that occasion, anticipated what was happening and resigned like a man, without excuses, without quibbling. He just took it and said, I resign. I wasn't able to do the job, and I defer. No, he did not say that yet. In fact, I think at this moment I'll have Mr. Gafford stand and make a short statement and get that out of the way.
Most of you ladies and gentlemen here either know me from having attended courses over the years, or you certainly know of me by virtue of having received letters over my signature. I want you to know that I'm here tonight for one single solitary reason. Mr. Martin has indicated these things may find a little distressing and a little difficult to understand, but they are facts and they are true and they are correct. And the reason I'm here tonight, frankly, is to keep a promise I made to the professor the afternoon before he died. I was in his room with him, and as I was leaving, I leaned forward, I kissed him on the forehead, and I said to him, you have my absolute promise that your work will come to the world and that it will be done correctly. Now, I had that determination right from the very start. The fact that I had difficulty, as it turned out, carrying it out is what motivated me at the time to bring to the trustees' attention the fact that the manuscript was full of holes, and ultimately, as Mr. Martin will go on and explain to you, to defer to him. And that's all I've got to say.
Thank you. I called Mr. Gafford the same day. What's that? Oh, was it a week and a half later? It seemed like I called you. I meant to. I'm sorry. Thought I did. Okay, a week and a half later, I called Mr. Gafford to tell him that I thought he was the most manly person in that room that day. In that room were Charles Hayes, Wayne Joyner, and myself. I really didn't for sure know exactly what was going to happen in that meeting. They wanted me there. And so I sat there, and I called him and I told him, I says, what you did here was very manly, and this will be your finest day in history, in your life, up till now. And I still mean that. All right. You're welcome. All right, so let's go on now. Now let's talk, let's go back to this trust, this Schedule B here for a moment. No, let's don't go to that. Now I was back at the point where I was saying, what did I find wrong in here? What bothered me about the book? Well, aside from the errors, I found in the work that Mrs. Galambos and her helpers had been doing certain things that really bothered me, and I'm going to show you what they are now. She changed things, and I'm not blaming her. Please understand this. I'm not here to attack or derogate, just to tell you the truth. So please put up just some samples here, and they're all over the book. We find here that Mrs. Galambos has in Session 3 of V50, she makes the statement, when so-called social scientists attempted to develop a science out of human behavior, they did not get very far because they did not know the criterion of rightness. The same is true today. Social scientists often mumble, there are no absolutes, everything is relative. This is their leitmotif. When I read that, I said, I never heard Galambos ever say leitmotif. And I went, wait a minute here. Where's the text on this? So I told Ben and Eric, I says, go get the transcript here. Let's check this out. Here's what we found. Now, when social scientists tried to develop a science, this is Galambos, vintage Galambos here now. They didn't even get this far. They don't even know what the criterion of rightness is. They don't have a standard. Standard. Not leitmotif. They mumble all the time. There are no absolutes. Everything is wrong. This is their standard pattern, not leitmotif. And I'm saying to myself, there's a difference here. Posterity is going to look on Galambos' V50, the lectures and the transcripts, and posterity is going to look, they're going to have a microscope on this. And if you bleed the persona of our great teacher out anywhere in the book, as far as I'm concerned, I consider that to be not right. Next example. You've got it? You're ahead of me, Ben. A stone and a human both fall. This is Mrs. Galambos' version. And they fall at the same rate. The only difference is that the stone simply falls, whereas a human being would probably scream and wave his arms and legs. Galambos. For example, if a stone is dropped off a cliff and if a human being is dropped off a cliff, they will both fall. Moreover, they fall at the same rate. The only difference between them is that the stone will simply fall, whereas a human being will scream and wiggle his arms and legs. I got the word wiggle. I said, that's always what made me laugh. That's what always makes everybody laugh. It's a key thing. It's vintage Galambos, man. He taught me about thought prints. I know how to detect them. I've been his student for 30 years. I know the man, and I can detect when something's tampering with his personality here. And it offended me. So now we go to the next example. Here's another one. V50, session 4. By the way, one of the toughest sessions of the entire course. There was one point in session 4, ladies and gentlemen, when I said, there's 4 pages here in part B, forget it, well, edit it out. I can't make any sense. It was just gobbledygook. I cursed Galambos. I tell you that I did. I was so angry with it. And it wasn't until just before we went to press about 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, I said, wait a minute. I better bear down even more. There might be a skein of argument in this tangled mess. That is essential. So I spent an entire day. I got down to my office. I started at about 9 o'clock, and I went all the way until about 6 in the evening. And somewhere around 2 in the afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, I said, my God, what is he trying to say here? I went back to sessions 1, 2, and 3. Then I went to sessions 5, 6, and 7, and I said, okay, I see what he's doing. He's talking about the natural society, the natural basis of society versus the historical basis of society. He's telling us that the natural basis of society is consistent with rationality and morality. Therefore, it's right. It's absolutely right. Then he says, okay, what is this theory about? This theory is about freedom. Is freedom the same thing as the natural society? I must prove, I must demonstrate that freedom is the same thing as the natural society. And I've got to get a bridge to do it. Well, the bridge was there. It was in all of this tangled verbiage, but it was there. And I knew what to look for, and I found it. And it's elegant. And you turn and you look at it in part B of session 4, and you'll find that what was seemingly impossible to edit is there for all of us now. Now, in this session 4, just wanted to give you a little background knowledge of session 4. She says, Mrs. Galambos says, in one sense it is actually a deterioration. They're talking about the society that's going from the tribal chief state to the witch doctor state. And he's essentially talking about the false democracy, political democracy with a capital D. That's the context. In one sense, it is actually a deterioration because in the old tribal chief days, you at least knew that the chief was a tough individual. He had to be tough. Now you get all kinds of emasculated characters who get their jobs because of their popularity instead of their strength. Now let's see what Galambos says here. As a matter of fact, in one sense, it's a deterioration. Because in the old tribal chief days, at least you knew one thing. The tribal chief was at least a tough guy. He had to be. Now, you get all kinds of emasculated, effeminate fairies, and they can run the show just as well. They have popularity instead of strength. Now, I like that. That's color. That's what brought us back to hear his courses. This is vintage professor. There's many examples. And when we were doing our index, which, by the way, has 9,000 entries in it, you pick any subject that you ever were not quite sure about, you look into the index over here, by God, and you'll find it. And not only will you find it, you'll be able to turn to the page and you'll be able to understand what he was talking about. Maybe for the first time in your lives, and you can fill in some gaps in your knowledge. All right, do we have any more examples? One more. Let's see it, Ben. Is this it? Yes. All right, here he is. Oh, my favorite chapter. Chapter 13. It's the only one that doesn't have a part A or part B. It's because he screwed up with the tapes is what happened, and he had to dictate the thing, and I can't believe he did so well to a blank wall. But boy, the story of Scipio it'll knock your socks off. It's better by far than B.H. Liddell Hart's version. It is Galambos all the way. Here's what he says. Here's how in Mrs. Galambos' version, she says, "It is a fascinating biography of Scipio and complements what I already know about him through my father. But the biography is purely a biography and a narrative. The ideological overtones are not in the biography. As a matter of fact, Liddell Hart sometimes distresses me because he has the usual military shortcoming of thinking war is a fine thing." All right, it gets the job done. It gets the job done, but it doesn't have that little extra that we all remember. Now let's look at Galambos. "It is a fascinating biography of Scipio coupled with what I already knew about him through my father. But the biography is purely a biography and a narrative. The ideological overtones are not in the biography. As a matter of fact, Liddell Hart sometimes makes my stomach turn a bit because he has the usual military shortcoming. He thinks war is a fine thing. As a matter of fact, he's just all in love with wars and generals in general." Now, those are just 4 examples, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm just bringing them up to you. We've got to take the trouble to do this tonight so that you can get an idea here of what I was facing. And what I was facing was this. My loyalty, my affection, my friendship for Mrs. Galambos was in the balance here. So I looked at her work and I said, if I make the corrections in this thing and get this thing so it's marketable goods, you know, it's literate, what do I do about stuff like this? And how many more are there? And in the presence of Charles Hayes, in my office, on October the 3rd of 1997, I told him to his face, "Charles, I'm afraid I'm going to have to go back to the original text and resurrect the professor. I cannot look at any other source. And this is going to, I got to start all over again." I might add that Mrs. Galambos had decided to take out the 3 workshops. I don't know, I haven't made the count, but in the table of contents you will read about maybe 30 or maybe more. I really don't know what the count is. I haven't done it. But there's at least 30 essential puzzle pieces of the theory of freedom that would have been lost. You want an example? Here it is. The Robinson and Crusoe story. Gone. Referred to in V201. Gone. The poor hapless reader of V201 in the future would say, "What the hell is the Robinson Crusoe story?" Gotta read the workshop to get that. Another example. Pretty abstruse. Abstruse, I mean. Think about it. You know, Galambos talked about freedom as something that was attainable. It didn't violate any law of nature. Remember that one? Well, I used to say to myself, The hell it isn't. It's not attainable at all. It's as utopian as all get out. I can even name a law of nature that would prove that it is impossible. If freedom is the societal condition wherein each individual is in 100% control over his own property, that's utopian. I can name the law of nature that would violate that definition. Men are fallible. They make mistakes. Hence, they lose control of their property. The critics of the future will be able to make Galambos a laughingstock with that. They'll say, what are you so hot and bothered about the theory of volitional science for? Don't you realize that freedom, which is the goal, the object of this theory, is unattainable? Don't you know it violates a law of nature? Or laws of nature? How do you get around that, ladies and gentlemen? You ever thought about that one? I did. Lots of other things. Guess what? Workshop number 1. Galambos removes all doubt. Freedom is an idealization. It's a perfect concept on the one hand. On the other hand, once you've got it, you have the technology available to you which will allow you to totally control the disposition of your property. If it is stolen, if it is even destroyed, the recourse, the restitution, the restabilization of the ownership position is available. It's instantaneous. And the occasioning for that is very rare because high technology will provide positive justice, which means that the dislocation won't even take place in the first place. Beautiful argument. Workshop number 1. It was there. It would have been lost. And the critics would have had a field day. Not with workshop number 1 in V50 now. Huge decision. Lot of work. Lot of work. You're talking about getting up at 6 in the morning, sometimes 5, sometimes 3:50 in the morning. And with a passion in you, going to your office and getting the original manuscript out and saying, okay, let's get a read on this. How you doing, Galambos, this day? How you doing? Are you getting off on something here? And if you are, is it relevant? Or is it just gobbledygook, or is it a half-developed thing and it doesn't make it? It's gibberish? Or what do we do here? And you come down, come down, come down. And every time you amputated, every time you deleted, every time you decided to pull this out, I realized that history was looking down on me. And Galambos too. This is a sacred trust. Well, I made that decision on October the 5th, the day after James Gafford's resignation. I got a call. Hayes wants me to come to his home. And he says, we haven't talked about money. And I said, all right, let's talk about money. And my wife, Julie, would you raise your hand, please, Julie? Let everybody know who you are back there, because you're my witness. But keep it up. They just turned it there. Here she is. I took my wife over to Hayes' house. We sat in his living room. Charles said, well, how about I pay you $600 for each session? I did a quick mathematical calculation. 19 sessions in V50, 47, I think it is, in V201. What is it? 51. Thank you, Mr. Gafford. You were my predecessor. Anyway, I calculated and it came out to about $36,000. But I knew how hard this was to do. And so he's sitting there waiting for my answer. And I remember that old surfing ad. Remember the guy was talking about getting a job? Y'all remember that one? He goes, nah. Who remembers that surfing ad? Anybody remember? Yeah. And it just came out of me. And I said, nah. And he looks at me as if to say, my God, what's the matter? I said, nah. He said, well, what are you thinking about? And I said, $300,000. $300,000 and I'll do it. Just gut. Just instincts. Well, he gets up from the couch. He must have read this in chapter 3 of some fancy negotiation book. This is what you do in order to get a guy to come around. He gets up and he walks out of the room without a word. He walks up the stairs, goes upstairs, and Julie and I sit on his couch, and I kid you not, for 15 minutes. That's a long time. So I said, Julie, I don't know what he's doing. Maybe he's got diarrhea or something. Let's just sit here and enjoy. They could look out through the window. You could see the bay out there. Swim, enjoy the bay. After a half an hour, I'll go up and see if he's died. So he comes back down again. And he says to me, all right. I don't know how I'm going to do it. He said, I had said, make it $200,000. The book's got to get out. I can live with that. And then I think he went upstairs. That's right. And so he says, all right, $200,000. But I'll make an offer to you. Now listen carefully to this. Either you get the $200,000 and no royalties on the second edition, or $600 a session and 13% revenue share royalty on book 2. I mean, the second edition of the book. It was an easy decision for me to make. I knew the man did not know the theory with that no royalty business. Remember? Good. I'm going to count on you to remember that. And this will shock you. He said, I expect you're going to lose. You got a chance to make a lot of money on the second edition, because the second edition is going to be a popular version in paperback. What? That's right. What? I heard that, and I heard your laughter. Paperback. Paperback. Do you all remember how Galambos said that cheapened something as significant as the Principia or the book? Remember that? You want it to be enduring. It's not calculated to be a bestseller anyway. So I said to myself, you can have your 13%, because I'm not even going to participate in the second edition. So I said, I'll take the $200,000, but no royalties thereafter. Now, something was going on in my mind at this time. What was going on in my mind at this time was, I'm dealing with a crook here. I'm dealing with a man who has usurped authority. I'm dealing with a man who has not told me that the literary executorship exists. He doesn't know that I know that. And he's putting out bids, and he's muscling me. So how do you deal with a coercer? Same way Galambos said you do in a dark alley when the thug comes along and tries to take the money from you. Remember that one? You give him everything you got, and he says, hey, you got any money in your pocket? Put that slide up here. Let's just read it right out of E50. Let's say a hold-up man attacks you. He says, let me have all your money. So you turn over to him your wallet, because that's obvious. That's in your pocket. So then he asks you, got any more money on you? And you say no. You happen to have another $100 in your shoe, which you keep for just such emergencies, but you flatly say, without batting, vintage Galambos, without batting an eyelash, no. That is not a lie. That is a deception. And if you remember, he said that defense is always moral. Remembering this story, I put myself in the same situation. I'm the literary executor. It's a sacred trust. Galambos can't defend himself. He's gone. I have accepted the nomination. I'm not going to let this guy get away with anything. And he's got the purse strings, and he's got the tapes. He's got everything you need in order to do what Galambos wants you to do. So the only thing I can do with this bird is to dissemble with him. Dissemble means to deceive. So I said, sure, I'll go along with the $200,000, you bet. No problem. All right. I said, well, we need to have some sort of an agreement here. So he is still apparently fuming over this. And he prepares for me a memorandum of agreement. And I want you to read this. I'm only going to highlight the parts that I think it should outrage you. So let's go. Paragraph 1. This agreement is entered into by the Universal Scientific Publications Company, a California corporation, TUSPCO, and William Martin. Now let's just stop right there, everybody. How come it says William Martin? I'm going to tell you why. Because he told me you cannot sign as a literary executor. I don't recognize the title. I don't recognize the function. You are to be a co-editor with Mrs. Galambos under the auspices of TUSPCO. I said, I will not be a co-editor with Mrs. Galambos if I'm not using her work, because it isn't true. It isn't true. It's a lie. And I don't want to foist upon you, the readers here. I don't want to foist upon posterity. I don't want to foist upon Mrs. Galambos and her helpers or Mr. Galambos something that is not true. It shouldn't be done. Nope, you must be a co-editor. We don't recognize the literary executorship. And he was adamant about it. So I dissembled again. I said, okay, all right, just put my name. Just put my name down. That's it. Just my name. This is a contract between us. That's why it only says William Martin. For the purpose of Martin performing as editor-in-chief, nowhere did Galambos ever talk about an editor-in-chief. An editor-in-chief under TUSPCO, which they, the trustees, are running. And I smelled a rat here. I said, oh, I see. Okay, I'm just a flunky, just an editor-in-chief under TUSPCO, not the literary executor who stands independent of all of this. Book 1 as further described below. Let's get the next one in here. Volume 1 of Book 1, this is paragraph 4A. Volume 1 of Book 1 shall consist of the 16 V50 lectures and V50X lecture. Should have been an S on there. I told the boys, I says, just to let everybody know, this guy's illiterate. If he's not illiterate, he's careless. I can't afford to be that way. I can't afford to be that way. Lectures should be lectures. Appendices, endnotes, and index, and shall be delivered or available for delivery no later than 1998, January 10th. Now let's see. That was on October the, get the dates here, 9th. October the 9th. I don't even have the tapes yet. I don't have the computer yet. I don't have anything to work with. Nothing. And I'm supposed to get the entire book, which we've been waiting 27 years for, that nobody could do, and I have to have it ready to go to the printers. I have to have this thing completed by January 10th. Are you a madman or something? For purposes of this agreement, delivered shall also mean available for delivery in view that some subscribers, sick. What's that there? What's this here for? current address, singular, are not sick to TUSPCO. This is a trustee of Galambos' Sacred Trust. Let's go on. Paragraph 5C. If Book 1, Volume 1 is delivered on or before 1998, January 10th, and after 1997, December 20th, then the additional advance described in the above paragraph concerning my compensation is reduced to $675. In other words, I'm not going to get fully paid. I'm going to get stiffed if I don't have this thing ready by December the 20th. Next. If Book 1, Volume 1 is delivered after 1998, January 10th, get this one, then the total compensation shall be reduced $1,000 per day thereafter until delivered. You know something? Something in the back of my mind, and I hope it does with you too, tells me that progress reports are the absolute anathema of all creative intellectual work. You remember that? We've got quotes on that somewhere in here in the slides, but I won't bother you, Ben. Yeah, go ahead and put it up. Let's do it. Let's just see what Galambos said about progress reports and making a man of intellectual sensitivity, the literary agent of Galambos' works. You do not bother me with such foolishness as progress reports and writing your summaries and presentation notices and outlines of how far I have gone or what I am working on. Again, another one. You got another one on that?
That's right there.
Oh, thank you so quick, Ben. Thank you. Progress reports are the enemy of science, and I have a lecture on that someplace. Not here. I couldn't find it either, but I know it's out there. And I don't make good progress reports, and they always had trouble getting a progress report out of me because I don't participate in this type of activity, and neither do I. And neither do I. Yet, I put my own deadlines. I give myself deadlines to make myself run. And I have huge goals to get me plenty excited. But I'm not about to have a Charles Hayes tell me that if I don't get this out by December the 20th, I'm going to get punished. And if I don't get it out by January the whatever the hell it was, 10th or 20th, I'm going to get punished $1,000 a day. What the hell's wrong with him anyway? What the hell's wrong with him anyway? Am I dealing with a man who is vindictive because he was bested intellectually in a confrontation? Or am I dealing with a damn fool? I told that to Wayne Joyner, and he couldn't even acknowledge it. Yes?
Were these terms part of a contract that you signed?
No.
There was further negotiations.
You're
on
damn
this.
right.
Okay.
You stole my thunder. That's Mr. Fountain here. He's been around a while. Yeah, you're right. I was just going to ask, would you sign that?
I was going to order a fifth of whatever you must have been.
All right, next. You got anything else here? All right. Rights reserved. Oh, rights reserved by TUSPCO. Let's see what rights reserved by TUSPCO are. And let's see how this affects you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not talking about me now. You get involved in here. Look at this stuff. To edit, amend, append, or delete any copy of any section of the book. I can work my arse off and get this thing done, and I'm subject to this threat. Would you sign that? Mr. Fountain, would you sign that?
Maybe with a couple of fifths. Whatever. They were serving that.
Next. To cancel this contract, let's see, where is this? Paragraph 7C. And by the way, if any of you want to see that document, I have it up here. But to spare you the boring tedium of reading a flatland legal document, so-called pseudo-legal document, I'm just giving the highlights, the points at issue. To cancel this contract at any time and without cause. Compensation for each completed and approved lecture manuscript and endnotes will be paid at $1,325 less advances paid. All right. To cancel this contract at any time and without cause. You'd have to be a fool to sign that. Anything else? Yeah, okay. First memorandum of agreement, paragraph 7D, rights reserved by TUSPCO. No mention of trustees, by the way. They don't even know who the parties to this agreement are supposed to be. Oh, you can read it. I'll let you read it. Think of yourselves. Oh, I see some people straining here. The lady back here in the third row. I'll read it for you. To engage a proofreader, doesn't say whether it's a Spaceland proofreader or a Flatland proofreader, proof editor at TUSPCO expense, for which any corrections, some little feminist back east could get real upset with Galambos' choice language, or some homosexual could get real upset over effeminate fairies. Delete it right out of there. I'm saying it's got to stay. Why? Galambos said it. Plus, I like it. Maybe some people don't. Maybe it's a little too rough for them. Tough. To engage a proofreader at TUSPCO expense, for which any corrections shall be entered into the manuscript by Martin. I'm supposed to be the lackey of some stranger back east who says, well, I don't like this as edited. You know, Galambos used to say things like, ah, hell, and goddamn, and damn it. I want you to know, ladies and gentlemen, I did not delete those expletives. And believe me, it gives it color, to say the least. Paragraph 8A. In consideration of the compensation terms and covenants above, Martin waives his rights to royalties or any other compensation in connection with the production and sale of any and all reprints of Book 1. Now, I want you to know this. There's a distinction between no royalty and 0% royalty. Remember that in V201? We got that, Ben. Put that up, please. Here we go. This is in V201, Session 17, Part B. I'm going to discuss the concept of no royalty. It's very important. It's immoral. I'm also going to discuss 0% royalty. That is not immoral. That is simply a contractual arrangement. But why? Now, why would anybody set a price of 0? Well, there are several reasons. Some irrational, donation to the world. There can be a few rational reasons for setting the price at 0. Introductory, promotional gimmick. Yeah, it can be 0% royalty, but who's calling the shots on that? It's the person who's offering the value. It was Hayes gave me an ultimatum. And he had the property, and he had the money. So I had to dissemble. The alternative was, I don't get the tapes. I don't get the equipment. I can't do the work. And I've already agreed with Galambos by accepting his nomination as the alternate literary executor to carry out his work, which means, I repeat, and you read it, to edit and or publish his literary works. Martin agrees, this is 8B, that all materials, recorded tapes, transcripts, manuscripts, photographs, exhibits, equipment, and the like are the property of TUSPCO. Of course. Of course. No problem there. And shall be returned upon demand, including any and all duplicates, copies, or kept on electronic storage. Don't buy that one. What if I'm not done? What if I'm not done? Who has the say? Who's got the responsibility of knowing when you're done with the literary work? The trustees? Why, hell, if they were capable of knowing when you're done or not, then they should have been the ones who are doing all the editing and publishing. And the literary executorship is a redundancy, and it's not necessary. In case, this is so ludicrous. You'll come to it. The fast readers will get there quicker. Here we go. In case of a dispute, parties agree to submit to arbitration before a single neutral, what the hell, what is that supposed to mean? Neutral arbitrator with the American Arbitration Association. How do you like them apples? These guys are so flat. They are so flat that whenever there's any kind of a pressure point, they trot off to Flatland for their instructions. And it's easy to understand because one's a lawyer and the other one's a bean counter. And you may say that I'm too rough and I'm a little bit too exaggerated. Baloney. I'm calling a spade here. The American Arbitration Association, with the losing party paying attorney fees, court costs, and all other litigation costs of the prevailing party. There's no way I'm ever going to submit Galambos' theory and the understanding and interpretation of same to some flatland organization called the American Arbitration Association. Not in a million years. Not ever. Thank you very much. Before I go on, I just want to tell you, I'm the man. I'm going to say it again. I'm the man. Galambos chose me. I delivered. I did what most people would consider to be a goddamn miracle. I started this on January 1st for your information because I was so damn mad and angry with these guys over this business that I soaked in my tent like Achilles. And it wasn't until January 1st, the date of my beloved firstborn birthday, that I said, okay, I'll celebrate my son Lance's birthday, and I'll go to work on this on January 1st, and I will work my butt off until I'm done. And I'll be done before the end of March. I'll show everybody it can be done, and it could have been done a long time ago. They just didn't have the right man. Now, I'm going to tell you something else. I'm not afraid, and I'm a fighter. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to fight. Galambos, don't make a mistake now. Don't make that think. Don't say, oh, that contradicts what Galambos said about building freedom. No, hell, we've got to fight to get to the point where we can build freedom. I've got major enemies here. And I'm going to go into this more now. But I've got to build you the background knowledge. You have to know this stuff. All right, so what did I do about this? I was so damn disgusted with Hayes over this. I told Eric Falvey back there, I said, Eric, from now on, you do all the talking with Hayes. I will not even discuss anything with this man. As far as I'm concerned, he's disqualified himself as a trustee, and I've had it with him. I said, what an insult. December 20th. Have it all done, ready to go to the printers. We don't even know when we're going to get the transcripts. We don't even know if we have to do scanning just to get the transcript so we can read it. And you got to correct all kinds of mistakes that scanning inevitably produces. We didn't have anything. December 20th. December 20th. What's this guy? Is he crazy or something? Or is he trying to punish me? So I told Eric, you talk to him. Eric gets into a mental fisticuffs with Hayes. Hayes says, I don't talk to Martin's flunkies. And so Eric said, fine, then you're not going to talk to anybody. So the next thing I know, I get a telephone call from Mr. Joyner, bad guy, good guy routine here. And Mr. Joyner calls me up and says, we've got to get this done, quit haggling and quit fighting. I says, okay, well, I'll meet with you. So on October, let's see, here it is. Oh, put up on the screen, please, Ben, what I did the next day. I sent this to them. Now, this is very important. Follow the logic of this. Is this it? Oh, yeah, I don't know how if you can read it or not, so...
No way.
Okay, well, I'll read it to you from here. Yeah, turn the lights down, somebody, please. That might help a little bit. Now, can you see it a little bit better? Okay, well, I'll read it. Who said that? I mean, don't worry. Don't panic. It's going to be okay. The Universal Scientific Publications Company, Inc., address Coronado, to the trustees of the... Now, please note to whom I'm addressing this letter. To the trustees of the Declaration of Trust dated April 16, 1992, wherein Andrew J. Galambos and Suzanne J. Galambos are trustors, or any successor trustee thereunder. This is for history, ladies and gentlemen. As a result of Mr. James D. Gafford's resignation as literary executor, I hereby accept the role of successor literary executor pursuant to Schedule B of the above-mentioned trust, which they never volunteered to tell me about. As this role calls for the editing and/or publishing of manuscripts which are a part of the estate of the trustors, with the, quote, order of preference being the publication of the edited transcripts of Andrew J. Galambos' courses, end quote, it is imperative that all tools necessary for the performance of these duties be put in my possession immediately. This includes computers, disks, tapes, or any other material necessary for the completion of the trustors' wishes. As for compensation, this will be negotiated later and should not be a condition precedent to the performance of the literary executor's duties. I put that in there because I'm saying, hey, if you guys can't cooperate with me and you're stiffing me on this stuff, I'm telling you, you get me this equipment and I'll go finance this myself and do it my way. Okay, so much for that letter. Then comes the call from Joyner, and on October 14th of last year, I faxed a letter to Joyner regarding the memorandum, and I don't know if we've got a slide for that or not. Yeah, well, anyway, I just reminded them that deadlines and mandatory progress reports are incompatible with literary achievement. I reminded him that's point number one here. Point number two, all parties to contract should honor their promises to perform and should not hinder each other by demanding without recourse or cause. Remember that first memorandum of agreement? The termination of duties. 3, production contracts should not be made with Flatlanders. That has to do with the Flatland editor. American Arbitration Association. I'm reminding an attorney who should have known better, who had taken B50 and was advanced in the theory. He should have known better. It's shameful. It's disgusting that they should put this upon the literary executor of Galambos. And I had my gut full of this man, these people. And I was very angry about this, and I still am to this day. And by God, that anger is very positive. Remember? Negative times negative. That's a very, very motivating thing. It's like somebody kicking you in the ass and making you go forward. I got the goal out there. That's pulling me. And I've got my disgust with the status quo to push me forward. That makes me very powerful. And by God, if I'd like to see anybody in this world try to do what I did there in less than 3 months, because I'm a hugely motivated man. Production contracts should not be made with Flatlanders as there is no pre-existing bridge from Flatland to Spaceland. They ought to have known that. They ought to have known that. Galambos said it. There's no pre-existing bridge between Flatland and Spaceland. Number 4, P1 entrepreneurial functions should be separated from P2 entrepreneurial functions. Get that one through your heads, you guys. I don't answer to you guys. I'm not your employee. I'm not your employee of one of the corporations in the natural estate of Galambos. He's got more than one corporation. Don't relegate me to that puny little position where I'm some employee of yours in one of the corporations that you got power to run. The hell with that. I stand above it, beyond it. Remember, Galambos said the primacy goes to primary property, not to secondary property. All right, number 5. Nothing, I told Joyner up here, nothing is more, and it's terrible that I should have to remind the trustees of Galambos' estate what the hell they're supposed to be all about here. Nothing is more critical than the editing and publishing of the professor's lectures in V50, V50X, and V201. Nothing is more critical than that. You know something I found out? There's something more critical. I didn't know it then. I know it now. And I've given away my question. So now I can't fool you. Probably not. I was going to ask you all. How many of you think in this room that the most important and the most urgent and therefore the most critical thing in the world today is to get the book out? And I'll bet you all would have said, yeah! And you're all wrong. First, we've got to clean out our Elgin stables. FEI stinks to high hell, or high heaven. We've got to clean it up. I won't do business with these people. They're disgusting. And I'm not afraid to tell you. And I know this is being recorded. And I'm taking the risk. But I know I'm right. And that's all I need. All right, so I sent him this thing, hoping that it might get him to think a little bit, maybe. So now I go up and I meet with him at the Baker's Square restaurant in San Clemente. I make him come down halfway. I go up other halfway for compromise. And he sits down. And the first thing I think we talked about, I don't remember exactly for sure, but I know it came up pretty early. I just wanted to test him to see how well he could generalize. And also whether he had that terrible malady called the true believer syndrome. You know, people who hear the course and they hear certain things and they go, now. Oh, you know, you have to do this or you have to do that. If you call somebody by the first name when you first meet them, and all these various little taboos that we had. Many of them, and you all know what they were. Probably bugged the hell out of you, put it in the guts to say it. I'm telling you, we all knew about it. I used to say to them, come on, I'm living in America. I'm a surfer. I'm a Southern Californian. I'm an ex-athlete. I like to talk to guys on a first-name basis right away if I can. I like to create intimacy with people. Not Mr. Jones. So, where was I? Huh?
At Baker Square.
Baker Square. Thank you very much. Baker Square, I sit down and I take this squint-eyed, puny little man, and I said to him, you know, were you ever religious? And he looks at me like, what's that got to do with what we're here for? I said, I'm just asking you, were you ever religious? I was born and baptized a Catholic, you know, and I went through Protestantism with my mom. How about you? Did you ever go to church when you were a kid? He goes, well, yes, I was a Baptist. No, he said, yes. And I said, well, what denomination? I was a Baptist. Oh, Baptist, that's good. Good. Baptists are pretty fundamental, Wayne. That's good. Because if you're pretty fundamental, you're going to get down to some basic appreciation for right and wrong. Let me ask you a question. Did you ever read the 6th chapter of the first epistle of Paul to the Corinthians? Are you aware of what was going on there? You know, Paul had major problems with the Corinthians. You know, they were Greeks, they were pagans, heathens. He preaches Christ to them and then he goes away. Then they reverted. They had all kinds of problems. Hell, when they were having Holy Communion, they were getting drunk. They were having a feast. Paul had to rebuke them on that point. He had to rebuke them on divisions. One guy followed Apollo, another one Cephas, another one Peter. One Paul, one Jesus. I'm telling him all this at the restaurant, and there's a table next door. About 5 or 6 old ladies were there, probably for tea or maybe their monthly get-together. And their conversation just gradually, we're gabbing a mile a minute we started, and it just sort of simmered down, and pretty soon they were all just listening. Really listening. I said to them, I says, now, in the 6th chapter, he's got a major problem here because the Corinthians are having disputes among themselves. Remember that word, disputes here? Huh? Disputes. They were having disputes among themselves. And he says, and you're going to the heathen to resolve your disputes. I am afraid I've labored over you in vain. Do you not know that you will judge the world? Now, before I go on in this wonderful story, let me see how well you can generalize. Take out the mystical crap, take the principle, and apply it to what I'm up against here. Simple as pie. I said, now, you're going to judge angels, Paul says. Do you not know you will judge angels even? Is there not a man among you wise enough to resolve your disputes? And you go to the unbelievers. I say this to your shame. That's what the American Arbitration Association business is all about, ladies and gentlemen. And I see you nodding, and you should be. You should be. It is shameful for us to look upon the law as something we should venerate. Why, just the other day, somebody said to me, "What do you think you are, above the law?" And I said, "Of course. Of course I'm above the law. I'm above flatland institutions because I know the difference between right and wrong. And I know what it takes to get to freedom. And I can tell you what it is. I'm a volitional scientist. I'm a philosopher. I'm the light of the world. I'm a city set on a hill. I'm the salt of the earth. And I hope I can convince you all to feel the same way tonight. You need it. The world around you is dying. It's sick. It's putrid. It isn't worthy of habitation. It's worse than Antarctica. It is so dreary. It is so cold. It is so pathetic. So there he sits. And I said, do you see the parallel here between the 6th chapter of 1 Corinthians and this document here that we need to talk about here? I says, I'm never going to settle for the American Arbitration Association. He said, well, what do you propose? And I said, all kinds of things. Let's go back to the beginning of the agreement. So, Ben, let's take a look at this. One thing I found out at this meeting, and you all need to know this. The co-trustees were adamant on 3 things for sure. And that was that I would have to share the credit with Mrs. Galambos even if she didn't do anything. Period. You got to agree to that or you don't get the contract. I'll say it again. You've got to give Mrs. Galambos and her helpers billing in your acknowledgments. Period. You don't get the contract without it. Number 2, can't sign as literary executor. We don't know what that means. We think it's vague. We don't recognize it. And you're going to have to live with deadlines. And you're going to have to live with the penalties. And they were adamant on it. I couldn't break them out of that one. Couldn't get them to budge on that. So my answer was, okay, what do I do here today? I'll play along with them. I'll try to clean this document up as best I can. Then I'll get the stuff and I'm on my way to produce the book. But I do not consider this a valid contract. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. When you enter into a contract under duress, the agreement is not valid. It has to be voluntary. These guys had the precious primary property. I couldn't get at it. They were muscling me into submitting to these points. And so this is how the agreement reads. These are the parts of the agreement that I don't agree. I think these are the parts that I don't agree with. Part of it. Let's see what it says here. Volume 1 of Book 1 shall consist of the 16 V50 lectures and the 3 V50X lectures, appendices, endnotes, and index, and, go next, shall be delivered to the printer no later than 1998, March 24th, in the manner described in paragraph 3E above. Compensation for Book 1, Volume 1 shall be $60,000, subject to penalties to be paid as follows. There we go. Couldn't get them away. I couldn't negotiate it out. As tough and strong as I am, I could not get them to budge on that. The alternative to me was bend. Give it to them. Understanding that this is duress. I'm not bound by it. I'm going to dissemble with them. Or I don't do it. And you don't get the book. Penalties for late delivery of Book 1, Volume 1 to printer after 1998, March 28, extended by Vismeyer, shall be as follows. 1. Total compensation shall be reduced to $100 for the first late day and increased to $100 per day thereafter and not to exceed $1,000 per day until delivered. That's about the most I could get out of them. They were adamant. I hope you believe that I was trying to get it all removed. Couldn't budge them. It's the best I could do. And now I still had to live with this. I'm telling you, it's unacceptable to me. These terms are inconsistent with the theory of volitional science. Penalties for late delivery to subscribers shall be described in paragraph 5B1 above. Rights reserved by TUSPCO. Rights reserved by TUSPCO. To edit, amend, append, or delete any copy of any section of the book subject to Martin's approval. At least I got that in there. At least I got that in there. In case of a dispute, this paragraph is subject to the provisions in paragraph 8C. Now here is Joyner's fancy rigmarole about how to resolve a dispute. Oh yeah, let's have some fun with this. Boy, you talk about vindictiveness. You talk about a petty mentality. You talk about guys that are playing like kids out with their marbles. Look at this. To cancel this contract at any time for good cause. And it really had made Hayes very angry when I said, you got to put good cause in there. It's got to be good cause. Occam's razor. Occam's razor. What would good cause be? What do you think? Occam's razor. All you got to do is say, violation of the principles of volitional science. Period. You don't have to say any more than that. And why is it only applicable to them? I mean, to me, not to them. It's a unilateral contract. It's one-sided as all hell. And it smacks of accusation, accusatory language. It's veiled. It's disgusting. Look at the next point. They say any violation of the theories and principles taught by, fine, I can live with that. I can live with that. All the rest is what? What is it? It's falderall. It's worse than that. It's vindictiveness. That's how I read it. Let's see if you do. Any felonious conviction in local, state, or federal court. I can show you all kinds of so-called felonies that I could be accused of and put in jail for. How about not paying my income tax? I don't pay my income tax, I could wind up in jail, I guess. Or if I deceive and I get caught, or I evade it, or whatever the hell the law is on income tax, that might be a felony. It's not a crime. The crime is the income tax, remember? Why does he put that in there? Felonious. Any felonious conviction in local, state, or federal. Let's dispense with that. These guys are supposed to be spacelanders. Look at the next one. Any filing under the federal bankruptcy court statutes to include Chapter 7, Chapter 11, and Chapter 13. Big deal. I don't see how that disqualifies anybody. It doesn't tell you whether it's moral or not. These guys could drive me into bankruptcy by not paying me. Would that be a crime? Bankruptcy. I'm thinking about using it. It's the only way I can get back at the IRS. It's one of the great laws of the land, maybe. 4, failure to meet deadlines of this agreement. How about this one? Adultery. Let's stop right there. I'm 62. What the hell are they worried about? It's hard enough for me to do it once a week at my age. Wasn't that way when I was 25. Might have been a little hard for me 3 times a day. Now, I don't think adultery is any great threat to freedom. Moral turpitude. He still remembers that apparently from his business law class that he took in college many years ago. He liked it. Moral turpitude. Sounds good. Throw that in there. Or moral, as though moral turpitude isn't enough. How about throw it in, get this guy. He's got to be watched. Or moral depravity. Any more? That's enough. That's the kind of accusatory cloud I have to live under here. I want to share it with you. You know, you people have gone 27 years and you haven't known what the hell is going on, FEI. Put in your good money. Lost all the interest on that over all those years. Now you got somebody that you can look to tell you the score. Warts and all. Is that it, Ben, on that? Come on, give me some more stuff here. This is the memorandum of agreement that I finally agreed to. I signed it. Oh, and I'm bound to honor it. The hell I am. In consideration of the compensation terms and covenants above, Martin waives his rights to royalties. I couldn't get him to budge on this one either. Of course, I don't give a damn because I'm not going to be party to a paperback, best-selling, popular edition that's 790 pages of revolutionary scientific philosophy and technology. Because it never will happen, and Galambos said, I never expect my book to be a bestseller. In consideration of the compensation terms and covenants above, Martin waives his rights to royalties or any other compensation in connection with the production and sale of any and all reprints, reproductions, or any other form of publishing, book one, electronic or otherwise. Fine, you can have it. I don't care. I don't want to be party with you guys. You're going to have to go when I have my day of recompense with you. You don't know this, you co-trustees. You're going to have a day of judgment coming up here. And that day of judgment comes when I deliver to the world the book in all its beautiful glory. All of it. And when I have that book done, and I let you look at it, and I don't hide anything from you, then that's when I activate the market. That's when I say we have to rise up now and make a place in history for ourselves and stand for the right and clean our stables. FEI stinks to high heaven. And it needs to be cleaned up. And we got to have the guts to do it. And there's one thing we go by. Only one thing. Not me. No. We go by the theory. And only by the theory. That's the ultimate arbiter. All right? More? In case of a dispute as to any provisions of this agreement, parties agree to submit the dispute to a single neutral arbiter for resolution in accordance with the theories taught by Professor Galambos. Totally against the theory. That is totally against the trust. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. If you have a dispute, somebody ultimately has to make the decision. Somebody has to make the decision. Okay? Question. Who is the most trusted? Who is the most qualified to make a decision with respect to any ideological or literary dispute? The trustees? No. Some neutral arbitrator? I say no. I say the buck has to stop somewhere. Can't escape that. Why not with Galambos' own chosen agent? If any of you remember agent principle law, you will know that an agent has a very powerful authority. He represents the extension of the very personality of the principal who appointed him. Well, you're looking at him. You're looking at him. So I don't agree with this either. Did I sign it? Sure. This was Wayne Joyner's great contribution to the art of negotiation. He's got a proprietary interest in this. I can't back him off of that. Couldn't do it. So there I was. Next. Okay, thank you. That takes care of that agreement. I said, okay, I'll sign that. Let's get on with the show. So then let's see what happens here. Let me go through this real quickly. My boys here have given me a little chronology. I repeat once again, I was not able to dissuade them of the co-editorship, the no literary executor issue, or deadlines and penalties. On October 19th, 1997, I signed what I call the Zama-Day Agreement. This is the memorandum of agreement number 2. That's the one I've been living by. And because I signed it, Well, we started getting stuff. We got the computer. Mr. Gafford was very helpful for us, helped us get going. And let me just kind of read to you so we can move along. October 23rd, Eric and Ben pick up computer and monitor from Hayes' office. Learn that there are no original manuscripts on the hard drive. Now, any of you know anything about computers? You must know what that means, because I don't. I'm just an old surfer. All I know how to do is think and edit and write, on occasion, some pretty good stuff. And by the way, I might as well make a little commercial. After the great work is done, you are all invited to inquire about my own autobiography and some of my other literary works, which will knock the socks off of you, and you will laugh all the way through. It's funny and it's full of life. That's what I really want to get onto. I've got to get this stuff done because nobody else can do it. And I know you're waiting for the book, and by God, it's there. All right. Hold on. As you grow older, you not only slow down libido-wise, but you got to do this. Not only do we learn that there are no original transcripts on the hard drive, hell, we got to scan in the original transcripts on a zip drive. No, wait a minute. We must scan in the original transcripts and start from scratch. Now that took time. How long did that take you, Eric?
5 days, 6 days.
5 or 6 days. Now there's 5 or more 6 days I've lost in this crunch of time. 27 years nobody could do this, and now I've lost 5 days, and I've got till March the 24th to get this thing out. And these guys they never even told us about the fact that there was nothing on the hard drive. We got to scan this stuff over, and there are all kinds of mistakes. Ben, put on a picture of me in South America. I want you all to see where I got this thing. Put it on there. This is in Ushuaia. This is the most southern port in the entire world. It's south of Patagonia. This is in Tierra del Fuego. Turn the lights off. You got to see this. This is historic. I'm not doing it for vainglory. I just want you to see what the hell is going on here. There's the old man. First beard he's had since he was 21 when he was on a Panamanian freighter sailing for South America with 85 bucks in his pocket and a surfboard. What have I got on my left hand here? Can anybody see? Where? It's off the screen. What have I got over here? It's not on the screen, Ben. Can you get it up or not? All right, don't worry about it. Over here are my reading glasses, and over here in my hand is a pen. You know what I got on my lap here? Snow-capped mountains. I'm way down at the bottom of the world here. Antarctica, 600 miles away. I grew a beard. You know how much I love this theory? You know what I was doing right here? I was preparing for you. Workshop 3. Cussing and swearing the whole way through because the damn scanner had problems. I didn't know what I was reading. But that's what I was doing down there. I like that picture very much. My good friend Lisa, who's one of my editors, said, that's a good picture. You look like a jolly guy. Jesus, never heard that one before. All right, lights, please. All right, continuing. Follow the chronology now. This heats up. All right. On October 24th, 1997, we order a laser printer and scanner. October 26, 1997, we begin scanning into V50 sessions. Takes 5 days. October 31st, 1997, Eric takes over, scanned in transcripts on zip drive to Hayes. Eric and Ben begin editing text, getting FrameMaker typesetting software up and running. We never got reimbursed by the trustees for this. In terms of money, it's minor. It's not a big deal. They still didn't pay us. Now, it could be that they lost it, and in the crush of business, we didn't come up and back it up and remind them. Nevertheless, we didn't get paid. All the way through November and December 1997, the editing continues. We learn the hard way how the lectures should be presented. Final result. Keep the lectures as they were presented. Now, I've already told you I made my mind up to do that earlier. But no, this is even more. What about when the audience chuckled? Bernice Stumps, and I hope I'm not imposing upon you, Bernice, but would you please stand? Everybody, I want a round of applause for this lady. She sat and transcribed our great teacher, sessions 2 through 15 and all the workshops of V50, and one huge amount of V201, which I haven't even yet gotten to. Bernice, I feel like I know you intimately. Boy, do you love exclamation marks. I could just see you when you were working on this saying, oh boy, there he is, he's going again, he's really going. Boom, boom, boom. 3 exclamation marks, 2 exclamation marks, question mark, 2 question marks. And I'm saying, well, hell, what do we do with this, you guys? We got to take that out. It's too much. So we have erased probably 1 million exclamation marks and slash question marks. But I love it, Bernice, because you show the passion and love for the man. And I just spent so many hours, we all did, with you. Dear you. All right. Where was it? Editing continues. We learn the hard way how the lecture should be presented. What do I mean by that? I said it before. We took, I said, wait a minute, everybody stop. Everybody stop. Let's see if we can take Bernice's bracketed comments about AJG chuckling. Stick it in there. Can't hurt if we do it right. So we put the bracket, and I said, take what's inside the bracket and put it in italics, and then let's punctuate this just right so it's in there, and the paragraphings couch it like you mount a jewel. And it worked. It was bloody wonderful. And when you read the book and you peruse it, you'll see where Galambos chuckles. For example, you remember this one? Hi, this is Ralph Williams Ford, largest Ford dealer in the world. I can't imitate it, but Galambos used to love to imitate that. Well, Bernice would have Galambos chuckles. Galambos laughs hysterically. The audience is laughing. Galambos is laughing. You know, and it's really funny. You want to know something? Mrs. Galambos never had that in her book. Any of it. All right. We were learning that. We're learning the hard way. Then I decided to say, hey, let's don't just do the session. Let's put in part A. Then we put part B. Because if we do it that way, then we certainly don't have to edit out the statement like this. Well, I'm running off the tape. See you after the intermission. And when you read that in there, you're there. You're there. You're really there. And so you come back. There's part B. Hot damn. We're back from the intermission. Boy, oh boy, let's go. It's just like you're there. And so my boys here put down here, yes, the audience participation was now finding its way into the text. Oh my God, that was a tough decision. That meant we had to go back all through the millions of words and find every single one of Bernice's bracketed comments about the audience and the atmosphere. In the final workshop, I was on a dusty, smelly bus in Argentina because my wife, Julie, loves penguins. 200 miles. We drive in Argentina to go to the largest Magellanic penguin rookery. And I'm in the back seat of this bus, bouncing all over the place, trying to edit Workshop 3. And I'm saying, this is good. Because you know, if you remember in the last session, that's the 19th session, there was a Teamsters or a union meeting going on next door. How many of you remember that? Yeah? Well, you know, they got going, those guys. They really got going. After a while, you know, they weren't just having a meeting. They were laughing. They were swearing. They were having a hell of a good time. I guess they were getting drunk. And at the end of the session, would you please bring me the book? I'll share a little bit of joy here with you, show you how authentic this book is. Thank you. Here's how Galambos ended the last, wait a minute. Here it is. He's talking, well, here, just listen to this. I recently was given an antibiotic by prescription by a doctor that I went to, and I told him I'm allergic to quite a few things. Penicillin and many other things. I said, can I be allergic to this? He said, well, in principle, who's ever had an allergic reaction, I know of nobody who's ever had an allergic reaction to this. So I took the pill. AJG chuckles. I took the capsule, rather. I took the antibiotic, and boy, I sure had an allergic reaction. I called him. You got the first case. AGG laughs with the audience. And I was so sick I had to call off a V201 lecture, which almost never happens. This was a year and a half ago. Boy, I couldn't have made it there if my life depended on it. And it was an allergic reaction to this drug. So he prescribed something else to counteract this thing. And so far, this has not had a secondary problem yet. But the point is, you can't tell in advance until you have some operational experience, and that's one of the difficulties of biology. And there seems to be very little generalization at this moment about a given input as to what the output is. If you drop 3 different stones from the same altitude, they'll all arrive at the ground at the same time. But give the same pill to 3 different people, and they'll react 3 different ways. Here it is. Here it is. This is the essence of it here now. He says, I guess we'll have to close the formal questioning. This is the end of V50. This is the last utterances of the great theory of freedom, without which man has no survival. And yet it's earthy. It's real. It's alive. It's the man. He says, I guess we'll have to close the formal questioning because we just ran out of time. And I guess this was punctuated by our rather pleasant neighbors who, with a rattle of dishes. That's what you want. That's what you deserve. And that's what you get. All right, so first 20 transcribed lectures of V201 were already on the hard drive. Eric scans in the remaining lectures in 3 workshops. Total of 48 sessions plus 3 workshops for V201. Scanning continues on through the beginning of January. Hell, we shouldn't have had to do that. That should have all been provided for us. January 1st. Enter me. Where have I been? Pissed. Sore as all hell. Finally, I said, I better get going here. March is just around the corner. Let's see what my boys have done. They'd done a heroic job, but it wasn't good enough. They knew it, and I knew it. So I not only had to edit, I had to correct and teach Eric, my good editor here, to do it right. Bring back in the persona. Don't be afraid about the cussing. Don't be afraid about his repetitions. Don't worry about it. He's got a style. Galambos has got a style. Trust it. It'll have a cumulative effect. It's almost biblical. You know how Galambos used to use the word and this and and. My God, if you read Ecclesiastes, you think you're listening to the professor. So on January 16th, I start editing V50. Eric starts editing V50X. A horrible mess. How many of you took V50X? Tough going, wasn't it? Tough sledding. Hard to understand what Galambos meant by the revolutionary new concept of apostolate. Was it derived? What was it? He said it was. How did he derive it? Tough business. Real tough. Harder than even session 4. So we did that. And I decided then on January 1st that V50X should not be in this volume. We never got it in 1968. Why should it be in V? This has got to be true to the times. They get what we got. And nothing more and nothing less.